it was $38.
All right, we have 1 minute. I'm gonna hand this out to everybody.
Owned by my family, if they had known.
Fine.
I didn't care,
Here, sit, rest.
I didn't care what the body was wear.
I want you.
But you know what, the second time around, you see.
Thank you.
Yeah, you look so good and wear it on the high.
So we're not having a guest, huh? Yes, right there.
Yeah,
I'm right here.
Oh, good to know
You
that.
told me that 10 years ago, and I would do that. Good. We have. It's a positive way, because they all you good, or I only pay.
Same here.
It's fun. I know.
Yeah, Mark, passing it around.
Did I give them? Did I give? Yeah.
Well, sometimes.
So I love your story. I really did, and I've been trying to say
We are
something.
lost.
You might have, about when you got your dress for the wedding, I said, oh, and I'm.
Okay, we're gonna get started. So I want to welcome everybody.
Is this yours or?
Her. So Dr. Lindbeck is going to be facilitating the class. I wanted us to just take a few minutes to just sort of center ourselves and prepare ourselves for learning. We're in our Beit Midrash, our house of study, and it's a place where we express the wisdom and the richness of our tradition. We are diving into the text that has been for centuries studied and discussed in many different houses of study and of learning, and the different perspectives and the different voices that have created the stories in which that we find inspiration and connection. Our voices join them. And that's a really powerful piece of studying text and studying Torah and studying rabbinic wisdom. And as I was thinking about today, I asked Dr. Lindbeck if it was okay if I had the first few minutes of the class, because I wanted us to sort of just try on a personal level to connect to Elijah. So Elijah is a prophet that we know of and that we call upon in different moments of our tradition. First and foremost, we call and we recite Elijah's name every week during Havdalah. So after we engage in the ritual of Havdalah, in which we are separating ourselves from Shabbat and looking forward, God willing, to a Shavua Tov, a new week, we sing after we have placed the Havdalah candle in the wine and extinguished the flame, formally creating that separation of time from sacred to, again, resuming the mundane, is when we start to sing Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu HaTishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu HaKilaji, right?
I just got goosebumps.
Right? Bimhera ve'amenu, Yavo Eleinu, Imoshiach ben David, Imoshiach ben David, right? Eliyahu the prophet, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu the prophet. We are calling out to Eliyahu the prophet. Hopefully this may be the time in this coming week of goodness and blessing that we're calling upon Eliyahu Hanavi to usher in the Mashiach. This time of peace, of tranquility, where all war ends, where we rise up literally, that those who are buried in the Mount of Olives will rise up again into the time of living, that there will be a time of tranquility and calm and love and blessing. So Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, is not just a prophet that lives deep embedded in the text, but it is a name that we call upon every week. Also, there's an entire ritual created around prophet Eliyahu Hanavi at Passover, right? The cup of Elijah is sitting on our tables, right? And as children, we always I remember just sort of looking throughout the Seder, did any of the wine go down, right? Did Elijah actually come? Right? The joy of waiting and that excitement of enthusiasm of running to the door to open the door to sing Eliyahu Hanavi while we are during the midst of the Seder. The idea that each of us contributes, there's so many different beautiful rituals and traditions that go into the cup of Elijah, that there are For some people, every single person around the table takes a little bit of wine from their own cup and fills up Elijah's cup. The idea that each of us has a hand and a part in bringing and calling upon Elijah to bring a time of redemption. But also we call Elijah during a bris, there is a chair of Eliyahu. There is Elijah's chair at every bris. The idea is that that is where we receive the child, and the grandparent will sit there, or the parent will hold the child during the circumcision. That the idea is that we are also rooting this notion, this idea, this maybe this will be the baby that brings about redemption. Maybe this will be the time that will bring about redemption. And there's a beautiful tradition that it says that if you sit in Kiseh Eliyahu, if you sit in the chair of Elijah, that you will give birth. So I'll tell you my Elijah the prophet story. So I was at a bris, at a Brit Milah, right at the time that I was in the midst of IVF, going through in vitro fertilization. And I was, you know me, as my eyes, I'm highly, aware of the universe and the energy in the universe, and the red strings and the Jewish superstitions reside within my every being. And so I didn't speak about what I was doing. I was very, I didn't want to put a kind of hurrah. I didn't want to let the angels know that I was in the midst of all of this, for fear that anything could go wrong. But I was at a bris, and I waited until everybody left the room. And I was like, I'm gonna sit in the chair. I'm gonna sit in the chair. This is like very powerful for me. I was really hopeful that this round would take, that we would be willing to be prepared to actually have the next round, which would go to implantation. And I said, you know what, I'm gonna sit in the chair, but I'm gonna wait for everyone to leave. And it was in the chapel of the synagogue that I grew up in. And everyone left the room, and there was the chair. And I approached the chair with some caution, and I approached the chair with reservation, but also with immense prayerful spirit. And I sat in the chair and I recited my own little prayer in the moment. And whether or not, it doesn't matter if it's did it happen as a result, but for me, it was the rootedness in that time, in that space, and a deep connection to my faith and to my tradition, knowing that I joined countless other women who found themselves sitting in the chair. And it all worked out, and we gave birth to Asher, but it was the one and only time I ever sat in a chair. And to me, it was just such a beautiful way that our tradition offers us these moments to spiritually ground ourselves and to connect deeply with a tradition, with a custom that resonates so powerfully and gives us the opportunity to mingle our external lives and our internal lives, our everyday lives with our spiritual lives, that they are one and the same. And there's Elijah the prophet and Eliyahu Hanavi, and the story surrounding Eliyahu that takes shape and takes form in so many magical and mystical ways, and yet is deeply, profoundly human, and recognizes the human experience that we are all living in. And that although some of the stories can be, reviving someone from the dead, or there's some sort of a magical happenstance, that what we allow ourselves to do in that moment is sort of sit back and say, what is it trying to teach us? What is it trying to express? What human deep desire or fear or anxiety or joy is this story trying to make real for us? And Eliyahu the prophet, the stories of Elijah, lead us to ask those types of questions. And then just sort of in summary, and that I want you to think about as we study Elijah today, is I want you to consider and to think about, Elijah means the Lord is my God. That's the translation of Elijah Eliyahu.
The Lord is my God.
Is my God. And the Lord is with me, the Lord is my God. I wonder, and one of the things I want you to think about is, Elijah is a prophet who is called upon to speak the word of God. That is what the prophet does. They speak the word of God, and Elijah's purpose and what Elijah is set to do is to return the people back to their core beliefs, that they are engaged in all these other things that are happening around them, and And Elijah is set out to return them back to the source, bring them back to God. And Elijah's name is Adonai is my God. And then Elijah in and of himself carries within him, in his name, this idea that God brings him to a place of wholeness and oneness. And that is what Elijah is set out to do, to help people return to that notion that God can be a stabilizing force, a oneness, a wholeness piece. And that is what Elijah each and every week, as we recite that song and sing that song for Havdalah, is that in the week ahead, we are hoping and praying for that sense of oneness, of wholeness, and of peace. So that is Elijah, and I turn it over now to Dr. Lindbeck, who will lead us in a study of Elijah, but I want you to think about those things and allow that to ground the study that we do today. But thank you for joining us today.
Rabbi Lila, thank you. Thank you so much. I would like to apologize for last week. My husband was ill and I got completely stressed out and I forgot to put it on the calendar. He's doing better now, and I'm sorry for causing worry to Rabbi Lila and Eileen, and I'm here and I'm very glad to be here.
Great. Well, thank God you're okay and he's okay.
Yes, thank goodness indeed. So yeah, thank you for you actually wrote me earlier this morning saying, I'd like a little bit more general stuff about Elijah, and I was wondering how to do that, but you basically did it. And I really appreciate that, Rabbi Lila. So I'm going to take a couple minutes and actually say I had mentioned the chair of Elijah at a Brit Milah, but you really made it real. And you reminded me of another story that actually doesn't have to do with Elijah, but does have to do with something amazing, which is a woman's faith. And it's the story of Rabbi Lila is incredibly learned and knows Tanakh and Talmud and all sorts of Jewish traditions. And this is a story about a woman who all of her Judaism was by ear, and although I'm sure she could pray the Shema and probably the Amidah too by rote, she couldn't even read Hebrew. This is a story from the Middle East about a young couple whose only child was ill, and they were terrifically worried, and the doctors couldn't do anything. And one day the woman found a little scrap of Hebrew writing that seemed to be from the Bible. She could kind of recognize the way the text was written, and she felt that it was a blessing from God, and she came back and she placed it on the baby's cradle, and she prayed, and the baby was cured. And she runs to her husband when he comes home from work, and she tells him this miracle that happened. And he looks at the scrap of Hebrew writing she saw, and he is absolutely horrified because it's the curses from Deuteronomy, everything, all the horrible things that will come upon the Jewish people if they do not obey God's laws. And he runs to the rabbi and says, has my wife somehow cursed our baby? And the rabbi just laughs at him and says, well, kindly laughs at him and says, no, of course not. Her pure and beautiful faith cured the child. And and it probably was indeed God's will that she found the Hebrew writing and thought it was, and recognized its sacredness. So I guess I will say that there's a certain kind of mirror image symmetry, a incredibly learned woman rabbi practicing a folk custom and being blessed, and a utterly ignorant Middle Eastern Jewish housewife not reading, but loving the words of scripture and being blessed. Next week, we'll talk more about Elijah at Passover, and also some about Elijah at Motzei Shabbat at the end of and Havdalah at the end of Shabbat. but today I want to talk more about Elijah in the Talmud. And I'm going to share screen for a story that I actually also teach, and I will share screen, but I will really tell it more than but Elijah has essentially three functions in the Talmud. One is to tell people, particularly rabbis, God's will. The other is to make his presence, is to visit those who are particularly holy, but also signal what is right and what is wrong by whether he stays away from people who do something wrong. Like the story I told last week about the person who put a gatehouse up that prevented panhandlers from directly asking a wealthy household for food, and therefore Elijah stayed away. And the third thing that Elijah does is appear in disguise. But and we're going to look at a story about that before we're done. But first, this is a favorite story of mine. I actually teach this story because I got permission to teach my world literature class at Florida Atlantic as kind of a little bit of a religious studies class. We read the Tanakh and the New Testament and the Quran, and we also read sacred stories from the Talmud and from the Hasidic tradition, as well as Sufi stories and stories of St. Francis. And so this is a really favorite story of mine, and you can look at the text or not look at the text because I'm basically going to tell it. So Rabbi Broka Hosea was found in the marketplace of Belapat. That's just some town in Babylonia. We don't know where really, or at least I certainly don't. But Elijah was often found with him, and that means that that's a particular phrase that means that Rabbi Broka was a very special man. That Elijah often visited him, and he was aware of it because Elijah can also appear incognito. So the rabbi said to Elijah, "Is there a son of the world to come in this marketplace? Does there, you could say, a child of the world to come, because that's what it really means." And that doesn't mean necessarily someone who is going to heaven, but rather someone who is worthy of God's kingdom. Somebody who is uniquely pleasing to God would be another way of looking at it. And Elijah said, "No, not at the moment." But at that moment, Elijah saw a man who had black shoes and did not wear a blue thread on his cloak. If you looked at it from a religious Jewish perspective these days, you would say a fellow wearing, I don't know, jeans and a t-shirt from some hard rock band and no kippah. So not a guy who looked like a respectable Jewish person. I mean, I'm not saying that's obviously this is most Reform folks don't cover their heads, but you get the picture. This is a place where Jews dressed in a distinctive way, the way Orthodox Jews do today. So Elijah said, "This one is a child of the world to come." So Rabbi Broka ran after him and said to him, "So what do you do? What makes you so special?" And the man said, "Go away now and come back tomorrow." So it's just blows him off, go away, come back tomorrow. But Rabbi Broka has heard from Elijah that this fellow is special. So he found him the next day and says, "What do you do?" He said, "I'm a jailer." He basically works for the Persian government as a prison guard. I lock up the men alone and the women alone and put my bed between them so they do not fall into the hands of sin. Good Lord. I mean, talk about how horrible that jail must have been with just everyone thrown in together, even men and women. And so he made sure that the women were protected from sexual abuse, and there wasn't kind of random fornication among these scared folks. And then when I see a Jewish woman whom the Gentiles fix their eyes on, I risk my life to save her. One day there was a betrothed girl among us, also a very young Jewish girl, whom the Gentiles fixed their eyes on. And I took wine leaves and threw them on her hem and said she was unclean. As I'm sure you don't know, and I didn't know until I was in graduate school and studying up about stories like this. The Zoroastrian Persians had a pretty intense menstrual taboo also, maybe even more so than the Jews. And so the kind of reddish, blackish, lumpy wine leaves on the hem of her garment, apologies to any men present, would have definitely cued them right in that this is not someone they should go near. But then Rabbi Broca says to the jailer, why don't you have a blue thread and why do you wear black shoes? The blue thread would be, at the fixed on the end of it, what we think of as the talit knot, or the knot on a tallis, but those days many garments were four-cornered because people weren't wearing a t-shirt, shirts and trousers. So any Jewish man would have had that knot. And he says, well, I don't do that. I come and go among Gentiles. It is so they do not know I am a Jew. And this isn't just so he can do his work as a jailer, but when they decree a decree against the Jews, because he comes and goes, apparently, in the governor's office or whatnot, I tell the rabbis, and they pray for mercy, and the decree is annulled. And why, when I said to you, what do you do, did you say, go away and come back tomorrow? Well, the jailer said, at that hour, they were just about to, decree some sort of new law or tax or something else that would be bad for the Jewish people. And I said, I will go tell the rabbis so they pray for mercy about this. And so what does that teach you about what it means to be a righteous person? That's what I ask my students about this. Are appearances important?
Did you check the box to play sound and optimize for video when you shared this?
There's
I
no
don't,
sound.
it's not video, so I don't think it would make a difference.
He doesn't have sound. I think the question is for everyone here. So let's break down the story a little bit. So can you go back up a little bit here? So what are some things that stand out for you in the text that we see here? So I think one of the things
I think
that's
I'll just here, that's a good place. That's
yeah.
That's
Is this in Persia or Babylon?
this is in this is in Persian-ruled Babylonia.
So the text is making some distinctions here. The first distinction is through the garb, right, which we've talked about. The blue thread is what?
Talit.
And is the tzitzit, right? The tzitzit, the blue is tchelet, which traditionally written in the Torah that there should be some blue string thread. We're not necessarily 100% sure on the full origin of where that color comes from, but it was to denote like something intentional that this thread is a reminder for us that we are to live according to the mitzvot, which is what the tzitzit. That's why we have the fringe garments. That if you're not wearing a talit, then there's the talit katan, which is underneath the garments, but that you have these the thread on the four corners of your garment, which is a tangible and physical reminder each and every day that we are to live our lives in accordance with the mitzvot, with the commandments to follow. There's a tangible nature to that, right? That's the first thing. So what the text is saying here is that this person sees someone who doesn't have it. So there's the first question. The first question is, why isn't he wearing it? Right? Who is he? Right? So there's going to be more of a discussion amongst who this person is and why aren't you doing this thing? And what does he say that's interesting? The
He went
person,
to pray.
what?
I'm trying to say he went to pray. And I'm thinking if it was Persia, maybe in some way he knew what was gonna happen with Esther and just cause it's like the month of.
Adar today?
Adar,
Uh-huh.
right, so maybe he went to pray
Uh-huh.
about what was gonna happen in Persia, you know, about. What's gonna happen with Esther.
Well, she did mention Talmud as a text of reference, so I figure it was written in Babylon.
Yeah, that's what she, yeah,
So-
exactly.
So maybe Persia wasn't to be addressed.
So this, what's interesting is he says something about his clothing. He chooses not to wear them because he's not always within his community. And he doesn't want to be exposed as being Jewish, right?
Yeah, he doesn't want to, this is I come and go among Gentiles. It's so I don't know that I am a Jew.
Right. And when they decree against, sorry, can you go down? When
Yeah.
they decree against the Jews, I tell the rabbis and they pray for mercy and the decree is annulled. And why, when I said to you, what do? Did you say, go away now and come back tomorrow? And he said, at that hour, they decreed a decree. And I
That's what
said,
was saying, why I thought it was Haman, like, you know.
right, so there's actually a lot of interesting overlap. I was just exactly right. I will go and tell the rabbis so that they pray for mercy about this thing. So one of the interesting pieces that we're actually reading it today on Rosh Chodesh Adar, right, is that there is thematically, the language itself there is significance and there is a similarity in the story of Esther. Who are the two people that are having this conversation? No, in the Megillat Esther, in the scroll of Esther, it's Mordecai and Esther. Right, Mordecai is saying, you need to go in and tell the king to save the Jewish people. There's this decree. Right, so the language is also very interesting. Decree, there's a decree that's going
Oh,
out.
that is very cool, Rabbi Lila. Yes, and it makes a lot of sense that in the Babylonian Talmud, they would think about this kind of thing because, and see this parallel because the Megillah and the story of Esther was so important to them. There's no midrash Esther from the land of Israel, but there's the part of the Talmud on the Megillah is just essentially has a whole midrash on Esther in it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and also the cloak. So what's interesting too in the similarity between between the two stories, there's a lot. I think that's actually an interesting focus for today, given our time in which we're reading this, is the clothing. So first, Mordecai comes to Esther and basically says, I need you to do this. This is the moment that you were born for, basically. Like, you're in this position to actually have the access to the king to be able to save the Jews. Mordecai, though, is not speaking directly to Esther. He's speaking through a messenger. Okay? The messenger goes back and tells Esther what Mordecai has said, and Esther sends the messenger back to Mordecai to say, that's not how it works inside these walls. You don't just go and approach the king. There is a tradition, there's rules, there's protocol for how you approach the king. And if I do that, I'll be exposed. I will be exposed. I am not wearing the garb that distinguishes me as as someone who's Jewish. Right? I'm wearing.
Sure that was the case.
Sure, because otherwise she wouldn't have made it into the palace, right? So she has been adorned as the queen, wearing the garb of Persia, right? So she is not dressed to be identified as a Jewish woman, right? So that's the first thing. Same thing here. I move amongst other circles and I don't want to be exposed, right? So that's one similarity. The next thing is once she does hear Mordecai, because Mordecai basically says to her, this is the reason why you were born, this is the reason why you were put into this position to save the Jewish people. Again, she doesn't just say, okay, I'll do it, right? She says, okay, I will go and I will pray. And she says, and I'm asking all of the Jews of the community to fast with me for the 3 days and to pray. So here, and they pray for mercy and the decree is annulled. Same kind of a thing. They're going, but it's not just Esther. It's Esther plus the entirety of the community. She's saying, this is all of us. We're all need to do this together. And then it says after the 3 days that she rises and she adorns a cloak. She is robed. And the rabbis actually spend a lot of time focused on that robe. The robe itself is of a purple color, right? So that royal color. They also talk about that robe is a symbol of God, actually, that God is not actually present in the text, but God has been present in the text when the robe is placed on, the idea that God is resting on her shoulders.
And
Okay.
also the robe is, it says actually she puts on the robe of Malchut, of royalty.
Yes.
And some of the rabbis say means she puts on the robe of God at Sinai and giving the 10 Commandments,
Right.
where God's kingship is truly revealed. And another say that she puts on the robe of Abraham, who is both king and priest by God's will.
Beautiful. Right, so there's something interesting here between the two texts in terms of that the garments and these colors, the colors also are a physical representation. They are a reminder. They are a tangible way for us to have a sense of connection, a reminder of obligation, responsibility, right, in both of these examples. How does
I
that
like
sit?
that. And it's interesting that we also, just as, Esther saves the day, the jailer saves a young Jewish girl who is being threatened with sexual assault by doing something, a different deceptive thing than Esther does.
Right.
But again, actually also involving her clothing. He strategically dirties her dress so that the people who are threatening her, the men who are threatening her, believe she has suddenly gotten her period. And I go, ooh, no,
Right, that's actually very interesting. There's like an interesting overlapping of the text and parallels that are being drawn. And just like the symbolism with the garb and like how do we robe ourselves? What do we wear, whether that's physically or spiritually, to denote different parts of our lives, who we are, and what messaging are we presenting to the world? I just want to ask the class, like, how does that sit with all of you? Like, what are you hearing? What do you imagine? Like, what are elements in your own life that you physically either wear or hold that represent tangibly whether your commitment to the tradition, the commandments, like when you put on a kippah, when you put on a talit, like are there moments sort of either ritually or in your everyday lives that sort of are making a symbolic gesture to say, I'm in prayer mode now, I'm in meditation mode now, I'm in ritual mode? Like, what are some of those things? Please, Fran.
I always wear my talit when I go to services at chapel Saturday morning in my reforms in New York.
And why do you do that?
I can't imagine not doing it. I would feel disrespectful, especially if I haven't wear.
Right. Okay, so talk a little bit more about that. Why does that shawl add a layer of respect or add a level of sacredness?
It makes me feel holier. I got that talit when I had a bat mitzvah at age 50.
Wow.
And it just and my father always went to temple on Saturday mornings and always had this talit. Just kind of as a connection to my family and connection to my body.
Beautiful. Who else? Sylvie.
I've always had a problem with when I went from the other side of Florida, where I went to Saturday morning services, there was no question. You know, it was a Shabbat service, but when I came here, I kept hunting and looking for the service where it was okay for me to wear the talit. And I had a lot of difficulty because, you know, I guess I'm one of those people who doesn't want to stand out of the crowd. And, but I need to wear that talit when I pray. And whether it's the ark is open or it's not open. In fact, when I see around it for an early service, I pick up my talit and say, just to show, you know, somehow or another, it brings me close to my tradition. It just connects me better. So there's a conflict there, but I need to do it.
Okay, beautiful.
I
Yeah.
would just add that I love the Saturday morning chapel in my. I can't go to Friday night service, doesn't mean much to me.
Where talit you put.
I belonged to a conservative synagogue until I was 62 or something. So it's really
right.
Interesting.
just doesn't feel right, yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm actually going to bring back to the question I asked Rabbi Lila.
Yeah, please.
What, and we may just be talking about this story today. That's fine. And but I will, for those of you who are online, I will share a link to the other story of Elijah in disguise because it's just a wild story. Or we might just talk about it fast. Because so what does this tell you about what the rabbis wanted? What are the rabbis trying to tell you about what it means to be a righteous person? What it means to be a person truly, uniquely pleasing to God, a child of Olam Haba.
I think there's, I don't know if you can hear me,
She can.
humbleness, like, people who are close to God are not. Don't parade around saying, I'm close to God, I'm close to God. They act close to God. They don't sit there and go, oh, me and him are best buds, you know, they,
Yes,
you know.
absolutely.
They act that way, they're humble, and they recognize the mightiness of God. I don't think that that's my impression, and the people I know who are the holiest of all people, or I think are holy people, are probably the most humble people that I've ever met. They'll say it the way it is, like they're direct and they say it the way it is, but they tend to be humble, that's.
So you're beautiful.
Oh, go ahead.
But if you're really righteous, like this jail, wouldn't he wear the Jewish garb, whatever that may be at that time of?
Well, that's what makes the story kind of interesting and paradoxical. Why
Right.
doesn't he wear the Jewish garb?
And we know why, but still, why? That's confusing.
Well, I think there's you know the phrase, don't judge a book by its cover?
Right, well done.
Think about, the rabbis of ancient times were not like Orthodox Jews today, but in certain ways they were more like Orthodox Jews than Reform Jews, in that they expected you to dress a certain, a good Jewish person to dress a certain way. And what this story is saying, and it's using Elijah, who knows exactly what God is thinking and feeling and approving of, to underline an idea that, yeah, sure, most Jewish men dress in this particular way with the tzitzit and with I don't know what those black shoes are. I'm thinking, I imagine them to be some sort of, army boot, but something not appropriate to whatever kind of sandal or shoe a normal Jewish man would wear. And they're saying, yeah, the proper garments are important, but other things are more important. And we're using the idea of Elijah as someone who truly knows what God's will to underline that. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I have
Alan and
a
then
general
Martha, I have Fred.
question, and that is, with the 3 or 4 different forms of Judaism, the 3 or 4 branches of Judaism, is being righteous or living a righteous life, somewhat different?
No, I would
Yes.
say, not in the fundamentals.
Right, I agree, there is no I don't think there is a distinction, right, like we all understand and know what it means to live a righteous life.
And
We all-
someone talked about an important part of it, which is humility.
Mm.
And I think the other part of it that's here is serving other people.
Yeah.
And both people in general and Jewish folks in particular. And then there's and at that moment, 2 men came. So I love this because we have two versions of who are children of the world to come. Or two different 3 people altogether. Well, one person and one pair of people. And so the jailer is an extraordinary man. He he risks his life to save Jews. He lives he works incognito among a Gentile government that is potentially hostile to Jews. He is even willing to risk his life to save Jewish women from sexual abuse by non-Jews. So I think you read this and you go, wow, okay, this is an extraordinary person. And, he doesn't dress like a Jew because he's doing extraordinary things. And he is also, you might say, unusually, he's like he's almost, you might say, the opposite of a rabbi. He's not a particularly learned person. He lives in he works in a profession that you would normally find, soldiers and rough guys in as a prison guard. So wow, that's amazing. This is a very unusual person. And then Elijah came and said to him, "These too are children of the world to come." So Rabbi Broca goes and says to them, "What do you do?" And I'm just thinking that Rabbi Broca is thinking, well, if that guy, if the prison guard did all of that and risked his life and was some kind of macho guy, super Jew in hiding, what do these people do? And they said they are completely humble. We're funny fellows. We make sad people laugh. Then too, if we see 2 people who have strife between them, we take pains and make peace between them. An entirely different way to be unique, to be truly pleasing to God, to be a child of the world to come.
So it seems so simplistic at the end, right? But it's deeply profound. If we think about what the text is teaching us, right? That what does it mean to be a child of the world to come? What does it mean to be one who can bring about blessing and goodness and righteousness? It says here that if you see 2 people of strife between them, what are we supposed to do? Make peace between them, right? Like there's this responsibility, this obligation, this commitment that we see it, we can't unsee it.
So this minding our own business doesn't exist. And I know it sounds fresh, but nowadays you see these 2 people, whether it's a verbal strife or
Right.
they're not this bad blood between them,
Right.
or actually physical altercation. You're told, maybe you think, yeah, I don't mind my own business.
Right. Right. No, I mean, I think those are those those internal conversations that we have with ourselves too, but also to be the one that invites people to come to a place of understanding with one another. Right, like if you think about like if we break it down to even like, oh, I have people in my family who don't speak to each other. Right? What is like, could we be the one that brings them together? Right, I don't know, right, like, no, I know, I'm just saying, like, and there's complexity with that too, and there's challenge with that too, but, and there's not to say that you have to be the solution, the person who always has the solution, but to invite the space for peace,
Right.
invite the space for love. Dory?
Oh, I was just thinking of something last week, I don't know. I feel like sharing it, but
They don't have to.
yeah.
It's just like if we also think about like what Elijah's purpose was as a prophet. Right, to turn people back around to engage back again with God and with our commandments. Like this doesn't seem like such a huge hurt, like this doesn't seem like I'm asking you to.
Right.
Do something so enormous and huge. It could be and it can be, but there's also a simple, profound message to it to say, you are righteous and you create righteousness. When we bring people together, when we try to find commonality, when we just make someone laugh, right, who
Yes,
may be in pain.
Well, you know.
yes. It's also reminds me of what Malachi says when when God tells him to say, I will send the prophet Elijah before me to reconcile the hearts of the fathers to the children and children to the fathers, so that the day of God's coming will not be a day of wrath, but a day of rejoicing. And so it distinctly resonates with that too. These people are disciples of Elijah in um, taking taking pains and making peace between people in strife, but also in simply just in making people laugh and making sad people laugh, which is something that, and seeing that as a mitzvah. I mean, I have a feeling that these guys, if Rabbi Broca said to them, Elijah said, you're sons of the world to come, they would have gone, what?
Right, well, you don't
They
have
would
to
have
think of
laughed.
yourself this way, right? Right. When do you often feel like, when do you most feel righteous?
What do you mean righteous?
Great question. What do you mean by righteous?
Nothing. I don't even think of it, but righteousness, you go to shul all the time, that's, and,
Fascinating.
yeah. You know, you observe all the mitzvot,
Uh-huh.
that's just my opinion, I'm sure
So we
everyone
place-
is righteous in their own way.
So, but that's so interesting. So we place a really high value on the word righteous. You're elevating the word righteous, okay, Dory?
I'm not, okay. I don't think it's true, I'm gonna go to righteous, I want to go there. But I'm gonna.
Dory's not even gonna go to righteous.
Okay, so last week, I was in
Fascinating.
boxes, I'm standing in the line for the cashier, there's a woman. So I know where I know what I'm really good at. And there's a woman who's paying the cashier and clearly her mother is there with like a 3-pronged cane, and you'll understand this, Leon. She probably had some kind of neurological stroke, but she's
Okay,
not an orthopedic. And the mother grabs the bag and the daughter's going, no, mom, you just worry about you standing, and she's trying to pay. And like the mother's a little bit of argument, and I'm saying to my uncle, no. You have to listen to your daughter.
Oh my
You
God.
give her back
oh
the
my
bag.
God, Dory.
No, but this is what I said, you give her back the bag and, and she'll be fine and you'll go up, okay, so then they go up. And cause I've had this dilemma myself, now you have someone who can't walk across the whole parking lot. And she has to now pick up her mom, and she's sitting there in a quandary. And like I said, she's not my mom, I've done that already. So I turn around and there's a bench. And I say to the mother, I go, there's a bench. You go sit down and wait for your daughter to bring the car, and then I leave, okay? And I just think that was good, but you know what it was? The daughter needed that one extra person. She needed like 2 against 1 vote, like raise your hands, who's right, who's wrong. And she just needed that, and I feel there are times where someone just needs that nod, like you are being a great daughter. And this is very difficult.
Yeah.
And just the nod that I see you being a wonderful daughter, and this is a really hard thing, and sometimes you just need that person to say, to take the authority. I mean, who am I? I'm no one, I don't know you. But just to say, look, this is what you need to do. Look, here's the solution. You know, sometimes we don't see the solution when we're involved. And I think that's what the comedians do.
Okay.
They kind of add that, like, this is really, look at how funny this is.
Mm.
And when you can sit there and go, oh my gosh, can you believe we argued over that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it the same to be good or to be righteous?
The beautiful question. Is it the same to be good and to be righteous? Okay, Sylvie says no, so why do you say
Absolutely
no?
not, no, absolutely not, and I have the living proof of it, I have a son who, you know, thinks the right thing to do, whatever that thing is, the right thing. And I say there's the right, and then there's the kind. One comes from the soul, one comes completely cerebral. Sometimes we have to give up the right, it is not always necessary to do the right thing, you know, according. But it is something.
And you
to-
know, I think you're completely right. And I think it's also sometimes true that we have to give up the kind thing in order to do the right thing. And I think that's one thing that it takes a whole lifetime to learn. When we can to discern that. And you know, it's still a work in progress with me, and I turned 65 last year.
Maddie, go ahead.
I kind of want to give the flip side of what Dory said. To me, when I feel righteous is when I surrender. When what? Surrender. Because I'm only acting out of my perspective. Of course, there are times that I sometimes get that intuition, I know God gave it to me. But in general, I've learned to apply what's called lip glue. Because that's having faith in God. And I step aside, and that's my humanness, my humbleness, and to say, if God needs me to interfere or to ingest my part, I'll find out. But that's what I feel.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Maddie. Marcia.
I'll add one more thing to add to Rabbi Lila's question. What is the root of tzedakah in Hebrew?
Tzedek.
Tzedek, which is
Rachel.
Right moves.
Yeah.
righteousness. I'm going to actually do a little creative addition to this story. We don't have too much more time, and I think I'm not going to do it so much as a modern feminist as someone who knows history and loves the rabbinic view of women, which was mixed but had some strengths, like we saw last week in the story about how a woman is a man's partner in the household. Elijah, then after this, Rabbi Broca is walking with Elijah, and Elijah points to a doorway and says, Bat Olam Haba, a daughter of the world to come lives here. And then Rabbi Broca goes, and so he knocks on the door, and a ordinary looking, slightly tired woman looks maybe I'm just gonna say that she's a fairly elderly woman, looks out at him and he says, "What do you do?" She goes, she goes, "Come in. Do you need something to eat?" And he goes, "No, and I just want to know, ma'am. I just want to know what you do." And she says, "Well, whenever a beggar knocks on the door, I make sure that he has um, a loaf of pita stuffed with some lentils or meat if I have it, and I always make sure that he has, if he's Jewish, I always make sure that he has water to wash his hands and say the blessing. And if he needs to sit down in the courtyard, I make sure that he has a seat for himself, and I give him a glass of pure water to drink, or maybe some watered wine if I have it, and I ask about how he's doing, and I listen to him. And bless him on his way." And because the one thing that the rabbis really respected women for is that when they gave tzedakah, they didn't just like, drop a coin into someone's hand and walk away. They gave them home cooked food and they cared for them. And this woman is just like the funny guys who make people laugh and take pains to make peace between those who are quarreling. This woman kicks it up another notch and does tzedakah with true love. And so that's my addition to the story that is pretty true to the rabbinic tradition of the Talmud.
Beautiful. I think, that's a beautiful way to sort of bring it home to conclude for today, for all of us to think about how do we nourish and nurture, and how do we lead with righteousness? How do we lead with goodness? How do we lead with blessing? And how do we help to alleviate someone's pain, whether that's through laughter, through joy, through sharing, through listening, through offering a seat or a meal or whatever that is to think about what Elijah is teaching us here and what the story is teaching us here is how do we lead with a sense of sacred righteousness, and in order to bring about a world of calm, tranquility, and peace. All right, well, thank you all so
And
much.
I am just going to say for everyone who is online, I just put in the Zoom meeting chat a open video, an open document of the handout I did for today, which we never actually got to. And I want to give Rabbi Lila, but even more so all of you, a choice for next week. I was going to talk about Elijah and Motzi Shabbat and Elijah and Passover, and tell some folk tales as well as a story from the Talmud. But I could, but more on the folk tales and more on how the Passover tradition got started. But I could also do this story that I thought I was going to talk about today, and I thought this story we talked about all day was going to be the intro, and we'd talk about that story from Avodah Zarah, which is a very wonderfully weird story about Elijah that ends with Elijah appearing in disguise and rescuing a rabbi from a Roman court which was trying to convict him. And I will give you all the choice of whether we're going to talk about that next week or we're going to do more on holidays and celebrations and folklore of Elijah. And thank you all so much. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you so